The council chamber on Valar Prime was built for beings much taller than humans. The ceiling rose nearly 40 meters, covered in soft blue light that pulsed like a slow heartbeat. Rows of seats curved around a central floor in a huge circle, and on that floor stood a single human woman, named Ambassador Rhea Solon. She was small compared to the towering delegates around her, but she did not look afraid. 500 delegates from over 200 species watched her. Some had 4 eyes, some had no eyes at all and used sound instead. Some were made of shifting gas, held together by thin membranes. All of them were waiting for the vote to end. The Grand Speaker of the Valari Concord, a tall being named Thasor with silver skin and slow, careful movements, raised one long arm. "The vote is complete," Thasor said, his voice carried through a translator box that made his words sound flat and cold. "By a majority of 81%, this council rules that the species known as Terrans, or humans, of the planet Earth, are hereby banned from producing, carrying, or deploying any weapon of Terran design, anywhere within Concord space, effective immediately." A murmur rolled through the chamber. Rhea did not move. She had expected this. Humanity had expected this for months, ever since the incident at the Ashwood colony, where a small human defense fleet had destroyed 3 pirate raiders in less than 4 minutes, using weapons that no other species in the galaxy had ever seen before. The weapons were not even that advanced by human standards. They were railguns, simple plasma cutters repurposed for combat, and old-fashioned kinetic torpedoes. But compared to the energy-based, slow-firing weapons most galactic species used, human weapons were terrifyingly fast, cheap, and effective. The galaxy had lived in a strange kind of peace for 3,000 years. Wars still happened, but they were slow, careful, almost polite by human standards. Fleets would exchange fire for hours, sometimes days, before one side retreated. Casualties were high, but nothing like what a human battle looked like. When humanity showed the galaxy what 4 minutes of human weapons could do to 3 warships, the other species did not see genius. They saw a threat. "Ambassador Solon," Thasor said, looking down at her. "Do you wish to speak?" "I do," Rhea said. She stepped forward, her boots echoing on the crystal floor. "The Concord has the right to make this ruling. Humanity accepts it. We will not challenge the ban." Surprised whispers spread across the chamber. Nobody had expected humanity to simply agree. "However," Rhea continued, "I want it noted, for the historical record, that humanity did not start the fight at Ashwood. Pirates attacked a civilian mining colony. 31 civilians were saved, because our ships arrived and ended the fight quickly. We understand that our methods frightened this council. We accept the ban as written. Humanity will build no more weapons of Terran design." Thasor tilted his head, unsure how to respond to such calm agreement. "Very well. This session is closed." As Rhea walked out of the chamber, a Valari delegate named Kessa Doln fell into step beside her. Kessa was one of the few delegates who had voted against the ban, and one of the few who genuinely liked humans. "You surprised everyone in there," Kessa said quietly. "I expected an argument." "There was no point arguing," Rhea said. "The vote was decided before we even walked in. Politics is not our best weapon. We do not need it to be." "Then what will you do? Your colonies are still at the edge of Concord space. Pirates, raiders, hostile independent fleets. None of them care about council rulings. You will need ships. You will need some way to defend yourselves." Rhea allowed herself a small smile. "We will build a ship, just not the kind of ship anyone expects." Kessa frowned. "A ship with no weapons? That is suicide." "A ship with no weapons, that anyone can point to and call illegal," Rhea corrected. "There is a difference." 4 months later, on Earth, in a shipyard, orbiting the planet called Prometheus Station, Chief Engineer Marcus Webb stood in front of a massive holographic display, showing the skeleton of a ship that did not exist yet. He was a stocky man in his 50s, with gray hair cut short, and hands that still had old grease stains from decades of hands-on engineering work, before he ever touched a design tablet. Around him stood a team of 40 engineers, scientists, and one very unusual guest, a Valari-built artificial intelligence core that the humans had nicknamed Watchmen. The AI had been a gift from Kessa Doln herself, smuggled through unofficial channels, meant to help humanity understand galactic ship design standards so they could work within the new rules without breaking them. Let's go over the restrictions one more time, Marcus said, tapping the display. A long list of banned technology appeared. No energy weapons, no kinetic weapons above a certain velocity threshold, no explosive ordnance, no directed particle beams, no plasma weapons. Basically, if it is designed to hurt something on purpose, it is banned. That is correct, Watchman said, its voice calm and precise, coming from a small speaker built into the display console. The Concord definition of a weapon is broad. It includes intent. Any system whose primary designed purpose is to cause damage to another vessel or being is banned for Terran use specifically. Other species may still use similar systems. This is, by galactic standards, considered fair because Terran weapon efficiency was judged to be dangerously high. A young engineer named Priya Anand raised her hand. So basically they are not banning weapons in general. They are banning us from having good ones. An accurate summary, Watchman said. Marcus rubbed his chin. Then we stop thinking about weapons. We start thinking about everything else. He turned to the room. What is a warship, really? Strip away the guns. What is left? Nobody answered right away. A ship that survives, said an older woman near the back. Dr. Elena Voss, the mission's chosen future captain. She had been a naval officer before joining the space program, and her calm, steady voice always carried weight in the room. A warship's real job is not to destroy the enemy. It is to make sure your side wins the encounter. Destroying the enemy is just one way to do that. Marcus nodded slowly. Go on. What if we design a ship that cannot be hurt, instead of a ship that hurts others? Elena said, what if the ship is so hard to damage, so hard to catch, so hard to outmaneuver, that fighting it becomes pointless? No weapon needed if the enemy cannot land a hit in the first place, and cannot outrun us either. The room went quiet, as everyone thought about this. That is not banned, Priya said slowly, checking a list on her tablet. Armor is not a weapon. Speed is not a weapon. Maneuverability is not a weapon. Point defense systems designed purely to intercept incoming projectiles without harming the source. Those are gray area. But Watchman, are shields banned? Personal energy shields for individuals are restricted for Terrans, Watchman said, but large-scale structural shielding for vessels, of the kind based on deflection rather than destruction, is legal for all species, including Terrans, as it is classified as defensive infrastructure, not a weapon. Marcus grinned for the first time that day. All right, so we cannot hit anyone. Fine. Let's build something that never gets hit, never gets caught, and never needs to hit anyone in return. And if it does get caught, someone asked, what happens when the ship faces something it truly cannot outrun or out-armor? Elena thought for a long moment. Then we make sure the ship is smarter than whatever is chasing it. We use gravity. We use debris. We use the environment itself as our weapon, because the environment is not Terran technology. It is just physics. Nobody can ban physics. Watchman's speaker made a small sound that, if an AI could laugh, might have been amusement. That is a very human way of solving a problem, Dr. Voss. Find the loophole and build a fleet inside it. Design work began the next week. The ship would be named the UES Aegis, after the mythological shield that could deflect any blow. Its design broke almost every rule of traditional warship construction. Instead of gun turrets, the hull was covered in dense layered armor made from a new alloy humanity had developed by studying meteor impacts, a material that could absorb and spread out kinetic force across its entire surface, instead of one point. Instead of missile bays, the ship carried an enormous set of engines, more engines than any warship of its size had ever needed, giving it speed and turning ability that outclassed anything in the known galaxy. But the real heart of the Aegis was something Marcus called the gravity loom. It was an experimental device, built using stolen theories from old human physics research that nobody outside Earth had bothered to develop further, because most alien species considered gravity manipulation too unstable and too impractical for warfare. The gravity loom could bend space around the ship in small, controlled ways. It could not destroy anything. It could not fire a beam. All it could do was pull or push objects gently, redirect debris, or create small pockets of intense gravity that would crush anything that got too close, not from an attack, but simply because gravity itself was doing what gravity does. "Is a gravity well a weapon?" Priya asked one afternoon, staring at simulation data on her screen. Watchman took a long time to answer, which for an AI meant it was actually thinking hard about the question. By the strict definition set by the Concord, a weapon must be a device whose sole and direct purpose is to deliberately inflict harm through targeted mechanical, chemical, or energetic force upon another vessel or being. A gravity field generator's stated and legal purpose can be listed as propulsion assistance, debris clearance, and mass redistribution for structural stability. If enemy ships happen to enter a gravity field and are damaged as a result of their own momentum interacting with a natural physical phenomenon, that is not, under current Concord law, considered a deliberate weapon strike. Marcus laughed out loud. "In other words, we are not going to shoot anyone. We are just going to make really, really bad neighborhoods in space, and if someone flies into one, that is their own fault." "That is one way to phrase it, yes," Watchman said. Over the following months, the Aegis began to take shape in the shipyard, a long silver hull nearly 900 meters from bow to stern, without a single gun port anywhere on its surface. To anyone who did not know better, it looked almost peaceful, like a cargo ship or a research vessel. But inside, it carried the gravity loom, layered impact-absorbing armor, engines strong enough to outrun almost anything in known space, an advanced sensor suite that could detect threats from farther away than any Concord ship, and a crew trained not to fight, but to survive, evade, and outthink. Elena Voss walked the empty corridors of the ship during the final weeks of construction, her boots echoing against unfinished decking. She stopped at the bridge, where technicians were installing the captain's chair, and looked out through the massive forward viewport at the stars beyond the shipyard. "No guns," she said quietly to herself. "Just us." Behind her, Marcus stepped onto the bridge, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. "Scared?" "No," Elena said. "I think we finally understand what this council actually did to us." "What's that?" She turned to face him. "They thought they were taking away our teeth. But teeth were never what made humanity dangerous, Marcus. It was our stubbornness. It was the fact that we never stopped looking for another way, when the first way gets blocked. They banned our weapons." She looked back out at the stars. "So we are going to build a ship that never needed them in the first place." 6 months later, on a cold morning at Prometheus Station, the UES Aegis was ready for her first launch. Crowds gathered along the viewing decks. Cameras from a dozen news networks pointed toward the massive silver hull floating just outside the shipyard's docking clamps. Somewhere out past the edge of human space, word of humanity's strange, weaponless warship was already spreading among traders, pirates, and diplomats alike, and not everyone believed it would work. But as Elena Voss took her seat in the captain's chair and gave the order to begin engine ignition, she was not thinking about doubters. She was thinking about the first real test that was already waiting for them, deep in a stretch of unclaimed space, known as the Kessel Drift, where a distress signal had just come in from a human mining outpost under attack by pirate raiders. "Watchman," Elena said, "set course for the Kessel Drift. Full engine burn." "Course laid in, Captain," Watchman replied. "Estimated arrival, 6 hours." "Then let's go meet our first real problem," Elena said, "and show this galaxy exactly what a weaponless ship can do." The Aegis turned slowly in the dark, her engines flaring to life, and for the first time, humanity's strange new answer to an old galactic law began to move toward the stars. The Kessel Drift was a graveyard of broken asteroids and dead ships, left over from a mining war that had ended 2 centuries before humanity ever reached the stars. It was a dangerous place, full of debris fields and hidden pockets of radiation, which made it a perfect hiding spot for pirates. The human mining outpost, a small station called Ridgeline, sat on the edge of the drift, pulling rare minerals from the asteroids nearby. It had no defenses beyond a few automated turrets meant to stop small debris, not warships. When the UES Aegis dropped out of its high-speed burn 6 hours after leaving Prometheus Station, the scene on the sensors was already bad. 3 pirate ships, old but heavily modified raiders, were circling Ridgeline Station like sharks. One had already fired on the station's outer hull, and smoke was venting from a breach near the docking ring. "Report," Elena said from the captain's chair, her voice steady. 3 hostile vessels, said Lieutenant Aiko Tanaka, the ship's sensor officer, a sharp young woman who had transferred from the old Earth Navy just for this mission. Raider class, independent operators, not affiliated with any known Concord faction. They are using directed energy cannons, standard Concord-grade weapons. Ridgeline Station reports 12 casualties, hull breach in Section 4, and no working defenses left. Time until the pirates finish the station off? 8 minutes, Captain, maybe less. Elena leaned forward. Watchman, can we reach them in time? Yes, Captain, but only if we do not slow down for the debris field. Full burn, no braking, will bring us into engagement range in 6 minutes. Do it, Elena said. Marcus, talk to me about the gravity loom. Is it ready? Down in the engineering section, Marcus Webb stood at the main control console, sweat already forming on his forehead despite the cool air of the ship. This was the first real test of the device, outside of a simulation, and everyone on his team knew it. Loom is charged and ready, Captain. I want to remind everyone, we have never used this against a real target before. The math says it will work. The math also said a lot of things before it met reality. Noted, Elena said. We'll take it slow. Priya, status on the armor plating? Full integrity, Captain, Priya Anand replied from her station near the ship's structural monitors. We haven't taken a single hit yet, so it's easy to say that. The Aegis shot forward through the debris field, weaving between broken chunks of asteroid, with a grace that should not have been possible for a ship its size. The pirates noticed it almost immediately. Their sensors would have picked up a massive human vessel entering the drift at incredible speed, and even without knowing the ship carried no weapons, its sheer size was intimidating. They're breaking off from the station, Aiko reported. 2 of the raiders are turning to intercept us. The 3rd is continuing the attack on Ridgeline. Focus everything on getting to the station, Elena said. We are not here to fight ships, we are here to save people. The 2 raiders opened fire almost as soon as they were in range, bright orange bolts of directed energy streaking through the dark toward the Aegis. On the bridge, several of the younger crew members tensed, some out of habit, reaching for controls that did not exist on this ship, controls for weapon systems that had never been installed. Impact in 3, 2, 1, Aiko called out. The first hits struck the Aegis along her port side. The ship shuddered slightly, but the hull held. Alarms did not blare. No decks depressurized. On the damage control display, the layered armor absorbed the strikes and spread the force outward, turning what should have been a hull-breaching hit into a scorched but intact patch of metal. Direct hits confirmed, Priya said, sounding almost surprised, despite months of simulations predicting exactly this. Armor integrity down 2%. Structural systems nominal. They are already spinning up for a second volley, Aiko warned. Marcus, Elena said, let's give them something new to think about. Loom activation, minimal power, 10-degree deflection field, centered on our bow. Copy that, Captain. Activating loom. Deep within the ship's core, the gravity loom hummed to life, and space around the front of the Aegis subtly bent. It was not a visible effect, nothing dramatic, like a beam or an explosion, just a quiet distortion that curved the path of anything moving through it. The next volley of pirate fire, aimed perfectly at the Aegis moments before, curved slightly off course as it crossed the distortion field, missing the ship entirely and scattering harmlessly into open space. On the pirate command ship, the confusion was immediate. Sir, our shots are missing. Something's wrong with the targeting. It's not the targeting, the pirate captain snapped, staring at his own sensor readout in disbelief. Their scans show no weapons at all. No guns, no missile tubes, nothing. That ship is unarmed. Unarmed ships don't dodge our shots like that. The pirate captain gritted his teeth. I don't care what it is. Sink it before it reaches the station. The 2 raiders adjusted their approach, moving to flank the Aegis from both sides, trying to catch it in a crossfire, where the deflection field could not protect both angles at once. It was a smart tactic, exactly the kind of thing a good captain would try. They're flanking us, Aiko said, firing solution from both sides in 15 seconds. Elena's eyes narrowed as she studied the tactical display. Watchman, if they fire from both sides at once, can the loom deflect both volleys? Unlikely, Captain. The loom's current power draw only allows for a single directional field at safe operating levels. Attempting a full sphere deflection would require far more power and has not been tested. Then we don't deflect, Elena said. We move. Full lateral thrust, 90 degrees starboard, on my mark. Captain, that will put us broadside to the station's debris field, Aiko warned. I'm counting on it, Elena said. Mark. The Aegis's massive engines fired in a pattern no traditional warship could safely attempt, pushing the vessel sideways through space, with a speed and precision that came from the ship's oversized engine array, built specifically for this kind of maneuver. The two pirate raiders fired at where the Aegis had been, a half-second before, and their shots crossed through empty space, continuing on into the debris field beyond, striking harmlessly against broken asteroid chunks. They missed completely, Priya said, a note of excitement creeping into her voice. They will adjust, Elena said calmly. Watchman, time to Ridgeline Station? 90 seconds, Captain, at current speed. Then let's make the next 90 seconds very difficult for them, Elena said. Marcus, I want a gravity pocket. Small, tight radius, drop directly behind us in our wake. Let's see how they like flying into it. Understood, Captain. Deploying gravity pocket in 3, 2, 1, mark. The gravity loom shifted its focus, and a small, dense field of artificial gravity blossomed in the space directly behind the fleeing Aegis, right in the path the two pursuing raiders were following. Neither pirate ship saw it coming, since it emitted no visible light or energy signature that their sensors were tuned to detect. The lead raider flew directly into the field, and its engines, designed for normal space, suddenly strained against a localized gravity spike, far stronger than anything they were built to handle. Alarms blared inside the raider's cockpit. Captain, we're losing engine power. Something's pulling at the hull. Pull up, pull away from it, the raider's pilot shouted, wrestling with controls that suddenly felt sluggish and unresponsive. The ship shuddered violently as its structure strained against forces it was never designed to withstand. It did not explode. It was not destroyed by any weapon. But its engines overloaded trying to fight the pull, and one entire thruster array tore loose from the hull, sending the raider spinning wildly off course, completely out of the fight. The second raider, seeing what happened to its companion, immediately broke off its pursuit, veering hard away from the invisible danger zone. One hostile disabled, no direct engagement, Aiko reported, disbelief clear in her voice. The second raider is retreating from our position. Focus on the station, Elena ordered. What about the third ship? Still engaging Ridgeline directly, Aiko said. Station shields, if you can call them that, are failing. They'll breach the main hab ring in under a minute. The Aegis surged forward, clearing the last of the debris field, and Ridgeline Station came into full view, a battered ring-shaped structure, with smoke pouring from multiple hull breaches. The third pirate raider was making slow, methodical passes, firing into the station's weakest points. They haven't noticed us yet, Aiko said, too focused on finishing the station off. Then let's introduce ourselves, Elena said. Full burn, direct approach, get us between that raider and the station. The Aegis closed the distance in seconds, its massive hull sliding into position directly between the pirate raider and Ridgeline Station. The raider's next shot, already fired and impossible to recall, struck the Aegis's armored hull instead of the station's exposed docking ring. Direct hit absorbed, Priya reported, no damage of note. On the raider's bridge, the pirate crew stared in confusion at the massive ship that had appeared out of nowhere and simply placed itself in the way of their weapons fire without so much as flinching. What in the void is that thing? One of the raiders muttered. Human, another said, checking the scans. It's human, and it's got no weapons at all. Then why isn't it dead? Elena's voice, calm and clear, cut through the tension on her own bridge. Watchman, open a channel to the raider. Channel open, Captain. This is Captain Elena Voss, of the UES Aegis, she said. You have 30 seconds to disengage from Ridgeline Station and leave this system. If you do not, I will not fire on you, because I cannot. But I promise you, the space around my ship is about to become a very unpleasant place for anyone flying an unshielded vessel. Your choice. There was a long pause on the other end. Then the raider captain's voice came through, tense and uncertain. You're bluffing. You've got nothing. Marcus, Elena said quietly, not bothering to mute the channel. Give them a demonstration. Small pocket, well clear of the station, but close enough for their sensors to read it. Copy, Captain. A moment later, a small gravity distortion bloomed in space near the raider's position, close enough for every sensor on the pirate ship to register the sudden spike in local gravitational force, close enough to feel the ship's own hull groan under the strain, but far enough away to do no real damage. It was a warning, nothing more. The raider captain's voice returned, considerably less confident. All right, we're leaving. This isn't worth it. The third raider peeled away from Ridgeline Station, engines flaring as it retreated deeper into the drift, joining its damaged companions in a hasty withdrawal. The Aegis held position, watching until all three ships had vanished from sensor range. On the bridge, the crew let out a collective breath they had not realized they were holding. Aiko turned in her seat, grinning. Captain, we just won a fight without firing a single shot. Elena allowed herself a small, tired smile. We didn't win a fight, Lieutenant. We convinced them the fight wasn't worth having. That's better. Down in engineering, Marcus wiped sweat from his brow and looked over at Priya, who was still staring at the damage reports with wide eyes. 2% armor loss, she said. That's it. 2%, against direct hits from 3 warships. The math worked, Marcus said, allowing himself a rare grin. Reality actually agreed with the math. Word of the encounter at Ridgeline Station spread quickly through both human space and the wider galaxy. Within days, sensor logs and eyewitness accounts from the rescued miners had reached news networks across dozens of systems. A human warship, unarmed by galactic law, had faced down 3 pirate vessels and won without firing a single weapon. Not everyone believed it. Many assumed exaggeration, or perhaps some clever trick with hidden weapons that violated the ban. But among the pirates and independent raiders, who traded rumors across the drift routes, a new kind of fear began to spread. A fear not of human weapons, which they understood and could plan against, but of something stranger. A human ship that did not need weapons at all, and somehow could still make you regret ever crossing its path. On Velar Prime, Ambassador Rhea Solon received a private message from Kessa Doln, only 2 days after the incident. It contained no words, only a single sensor recording from a Concord monitoring satellite near the Kessel Drift, showing the entire encounter from a distance. Rhea watched it twice, then smiled quietly to herself, and forwarded a copy to Elena Voss aboard the Aegis, along with a short message. Well done, Captain. The Council is watching very closely now. I suspect this will not be your last test. Elena read the message on the bridge, then looked out at the stars ahead, where the Aegis was already setting course back toward Prometheus Station for repairs and resupply. She knew Rhea was right. This had only been the beginning. 3 months after the Kessel Drift incident, the UES Aegis had become something of a legend along the frontier trade routes. Merchant convoys began requesting human escort ships by name. Pirates who once saw human colonies as easy, undefended targets started giving them a wider path. And on Velar Prime, the Concord Council found itself facing an uncomfortable truth. The ban they had placed on Terran weapons had not weakened humanity at all. If anything, it had forced humans to become more clever, and cleverness was proving far more dangerous than firepower ever was. Elena Voss stood in her quarters aboard the Aegis, looking at a star map on her personal display. The ship was currently docked at Meridian Station, a neutral trading post near the border of Concord space, taking on supplies before its next assignment. A knock came at her door. Enter, she said. Marcus Webb stepped in, holding a data tablet. Captain, we've got new orders from Earth Command, and a message from the Concord Council, delivered through Ambassador Solon. Elena raised an eyebrow. Both at once? That's never a good sign. You're not wrong. Marcus handed her the tablet. Earth Command wants us investigating disappearances along the Threshold trade lane. 6 cargo ships gone in the last 2 months. No wreckage, no distress calls, nothing. Just gone. And the Concord message? Marcus hesitated. They're not happy about the Aegis's success rate. There's a faction on the council, led by a delegate named Voth Kalen, arguing that our so-called weaponless ship is actually violating the spirit of the ban, even if it's not violating the letter of it. They want an inspection. Elena set the tablet down and rubbed her temples. Let me guess. Voth Kalen wants to prove we're cheating. That's the read Ambassador Solon has on it, yes. Fine. Let them inspect. We have nothing to hide. Every system on this ship is exactly what we declared it to be. A gravity manipulation device for propulsion and debris control is not a weapon just because it makes fighting us difficult. Elena stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars beyond Meridian Station. Set course for the threshold lane first. Missing cargo ships are more important than politics right now. Aye, Captain. The threshold lane was a long stretch of open space, connecting several mid-sized trade hubs, well-traveled, and normally quite safe. It ran along the edge of a region known as the Umbral Reach, a dense stretch of nebula gas that made sensor readings unreliable and navigation difficult. It was the kind of place where something could hide easily. When the Aegis arrived, the crew began a careful sweep of the area, cross-referencing the last known positions of the missing cargo ships. Aiko Tanaka worked at her station for hours, filtering through sensor noise caused by the nebula's dense particles. "Captain, I'm picking up something odd," she finally said. "Gravitational readings, similar to what our own loom produces, but much larger, and definitely not ours. It's coming from deep inside the Umbral Reach." Elena moved to stand behind her chair, studying the readout. "Natural phenomenon or artificial?" "Artificial, almost certainly. The pattern is too regular. Something out there is generating a massive stable gravity field, strong enough to pull ships off course and drag them into the nebula without triggering any alarms, since gravity anomalies near a nebula aren't unusual on their own." "That would explain the disappearances," Marcus said, joining them on the bridge. "No wreckage, because the ships weren't destroyed. They were pulled somewhere and trapped. Or worse," Elena said quietly. "Watchman, can you get me a clearer picture of what's generating that field?" "Working on it, Captain," Watchman replied. "The nebula's particle density is interfering with deep scans. I estimate we would need to move within 500,000 kilometers to get a reliable reading. That's well within the range of whatever is doing this," Aiko warned. "If we go in, we risk getting pulled in too." Elena considered this for a long moment. "Marcus, can the loom counteract an external gravity field of that size?" Marcus frowned, running quick calculations on his tablet. "In theory, yes, if we know the exact strength and direction of the field ahead of time, but we'd be flying blind into an unknown gravity trap and trying to counter it in real time. That's a big risk." "Then we don't fly in blind," Elena said. "We send in a probe first, gather data, and use it to calibrate the loom before we ever risk the ship." The crew launched a small automated probe into the Umbral Reach, watching as it slowly transmitted data back through the growing interference. For nearly an hour, everything seemed normal, the probe drifting steadily along its programmed path. Then, without warning, the probe's telemetry spiked, showing a sudden, massive gravitational pull, and the signal cut out entirely. "We lost the probe," Aiko reported grimly. "Same pattern as the missing cargo ships. No warning, no chance to react." "But now we have data," Elena said. "Watchman, calculate the exact field strength and direction from the probe's last transmission." "Calculating now, Captain. I have a reasonably confident model of the anomaly. I estimate an 83% chance the loom can generate a counterfield strong enough to prevent the Aegis from being pulled in, provided we approach at a specific angle and speed." 83%, Marcus muttered. "I don't love those odds. I don't love leaving 6 missing crews, and whatever's waiting in there unanswered either," Elena said. "Set course, Watchman. Slow approach. Marcus on the loom, ready to compensate the moment we cross into range." The Aegis moved cautiously into the outer edges of the Umbral Reach, its powerful sensors straining against the thick nebula gas. As they approached the calculated source of the gravity anomaly, the ship's hull began to groan softly, a sign that even at a distance, the pull was starting to affect them. "Field strength increasing," Aiko said. "We're feeling it now, Captain." "Marcus?" "Compensating," Marcus said, sweat beading on his forehead, as he adjusted the loom's output in real time, fighting to match the pull with an equal and opposite push. "Holding steady, but it's a fight." The ship crept forward through the gas clouds, and slowly, an outline began to appear on the sensors, then on the forward viewport itself. It was not a natural phenomenon. It was a station, an enormous derelict structure of unknown design, easily 3 times the size of the Aegis, covered in strange spinning rings that pulsed with a faint blue light. "That's not Concord tech," Aiko said, staring at the shape. That's not anything in our database. Whatever it is, it's generating the gravity field, Watchman confirmed. And Captain, I'm detecting wreckage. Multiple wreckage signatures, consistent with the missing cargo ships, caught in orbit around the structure. Elena's jaw tightened. Survivors? Scanning, Aiko said, her fingers flying across her console. After a tense moment, her eyes widened. Captain, I'm reading life signs. Multiple life signs, human, coming from inside the largest wreck. Then we're not leaving without them, Elena said. Marcus, can you get us close enough to dock without losing the counterfield? It'll be tight, but yes, I think so. The Aegis maneuvered carefully through the debris field, the gravity looms straining to hold the ship steady against the pull of the mysterious structure. As they drew closer, more details became visible. Ancient technology, clearly untouched for centuries, its purpose unknown, its gravity generators still running long after whatever built it had vanished. It's a trap, Elena said quietly, almost to herself. Not a deliberate one, maybe. Just an old, forgotten machine that's been quietly pulling ships in for who knows how long. Does it matter if it's deliberate? Marcus asked. 6 crews are missing because of it. No, Elena agreed. It doesn't matter. Let's bring our people home. The Aegis extended docking clamps toward the largest wreck, a battered cargo hauler pinned against the ancient structure's outer hull by the relentless gravity field. A rescue team, led by Priya Anand, suited up and moved through the connecting airlock, weapons free by ship design and by law, carrying only cutting tools, medical supplies, and determination. Inside the wrecked cargo hauler, they found 11 survivors, cold, hungry, and frightened, but alive. The ship's captain, a grizzled trader named Hollis Brine, nearly wept when he saw the rescue team's uniforms. We thought we were done for, he said, his voice hoarse. Been trapped in here for almost 3 weeks. Something's holding the whole wreck in place. We tried everything to break free. You're safe now, Priya said gently. We're getting you out. As the rescue team worked to transfer survivors back to the Aegis, Watchman continued analyzing the ancient structure, and its findings grew steadily stranger. Captain, Watchman reported over the comm, I believe I understand what this structure is. Based on its design and the age of its technology, I estimate it predates known Concord history by several thousand years. It may be a relic from a precursor civilization, one whose ships passed through this region long before any current species reached the stars. Can we shut it down? Elena asked. Stop it from pulling in more ships? Possibly. I am detecting what appears to be a central control node near the structure's core. However, I must caution you, Captain. Approaching the core will mean navigating deeper into the gravity field, well beyond what the loom has been tested at. Elena weighed the risk carefully. 11 survivors were already safely aboard the Aegis. The mission, technically, was already a success. But leaving this ancient trap active meant more ships, more crews, more lives lost in the future. Marcus, she said, what do you think? Can the loom handle it? Marcus was quiet for a moment, running calculations, checking readings, feeling the weight of the decision. I think so, Captain. But I want it on record. This is well past what we've tested. Noted and recorded, Elena said. Let's finish this properly. Take us in, slow and careful. The Aegis pressed deeper into the gravity well, its engines and loom working together in a delicate balance, fighting the ancient structure's pull with every meter gained. The strain on the hull grew louder, metal groaning under forces it had never been designed to fully withstand, but the layered armor held, spreading the stress evenly, refusing to crack. At last, they reached the structure's core, a massive chamber of dark metal and pulsing blue light, clearly the source of the gravity field. Watchman guided a small team, led by Elena herself, through a narrow access point cut carefully into the ancient hull by Priya's cutting tools. Inside, they found a control mechanism unlike anything human science had ever seen, alien symbols glowing faintly across curved panels, technology so old that its original purpose had likely been forgotten, even by the beings who built it. Watchman worked carefully, cross-referencing patterns, searching for a way to power the system down without triggering some unknown failsafe. I believe I've found the primary control sequence, Watchman finally reported. Captain, I recommend caution. This system may not simply shut off. There is a risk of a sudden gravity collapse if power is cut too abruptly. Then do it slowly, Elena said. We're not in a hurry anymore. Over the next several hours, watchmen carefully guided the ancient system into a controlled shutdown, gradually reducing the gravity field's strength until, at last, the pulsing blue lights dimmed and went dark. The umbral reach fell silent. The ancient trap finally stilled after who knew how many centuries of quietly pulling ships to their doom. As the Aegis pulled away from the now dormant structure, carrying its 11 rescued survivors and a wealth of unprecedented data about a lost civilization, Elena stood on the bridge, watching the strange ruin shrink behind them on the view screen. Log entry, she said quietly. The UES Aegis has completed its mission in the threshold lane. 6 missing cargo ships accounted for. 11 survivors recovered. 1 ancient hazard neutralized, without a single weapon fired, because we never carried one. She paused, then added, "Let the Council inspect us all they like. We have nothing to hide, and everything to be proud of." Word of the rescue reached the Concord Council within days, carried not by human sources, but by Hollis Brine himself, who insisted on testifying before the very council that had banned the weapons of the ship that saved his life. His testimony, simple and heartfelt, did more to change minds among neutral delegates than any political argument ever could have. Voth Kalen's inspection request was quietly withdrawn a week later. A year passed. The UES Aegis became the flagship of a small but growing fleet, as Earth Command, encouraged by the success of the design, began building sister ships, the UES Bastion, the UES Warden, and the UES Sentinel, each one following the same basic philosophy of survival, over destruction, armor and maneuverability, and clever physics instead of guns. Humanity's reputation across the galaxy shifted, slowly but surely, from the dangerously armed species to something stranger and, in some ways, more unsettling, the species that did not need weapons to be dangerous. It was during this year that the first reports began trickling in from the galaxy's outer rim, vague and unconfirmed at first, about a new threat moving through unclaimed space. Entire mining colonies belonging to smaller independent species were going silent. Survey ships that ventured too far outward simply stopped transmitting. The Concord Council, slow to act as always, dismissed early reports as exaggeration or local conflicts. Elena Voss did not dismiss them. Neither did Ambassador Rhea Solon, who had spent the past year building quiet but effective relationships with delegates across the Concord, including Kessa Doln and several others who had come to respect humanity's unusual approach to problem-solving. "They're calling it the Ashen Swarm," Rhea said, during a secure call to Elena, who was aboard the Aegis at Prometheus Station for routine maintenance. "Nobody knows exactly what it is. Some kind of hive mind species, mechanical, biological. Nobody agrees. What they do agree on is that it consumes everything in its path. Ships, stations, even planets, if given enough time." "And the Council still isn't acting?" Elena asked. "Half of them don't believe it's real. The other half believe it, and are too afraid to admit how unprepared they are." Rhea's voice was tight with frustration. "Elena, I think this is coming our way eventually. I think it's already closer than anyone wants to admit." Elena's fears were confirmed 3 weeks later, when a distress signal reached Prometheus Station from a human research outpost on the fringes of known space, a small science team studying an asteroid belt for potential mining rights. The message was short, panicked, and cut off abruptly midway through. "Something's here. It's not like anything we've seen. It's spreading across the hull. We can't." The transmission ended in static. Elena was in the captain's chair within the hour, the Aegis breaking orbit and setting a hard course for the outpost's last known position, accompanied by the newly commissioned UES Bastion under the command of Captain James Okafor, a steady, thoughtful officer who had trained under Elena during the Aegis's early trials. "Talk to me, Watchman," Elena said, as the 2 ships approached the outpost's coordinates. "What are we walking into?" "Unknown, Captain. Sensor readings from the outpost went dark 11 minutes after the initial distress call. I am detecting an unusual energy signature in the region, unlike anything in Concord or human databases. It does not match any known ship design." "Bastion, this is Aegis," Elena said over the comm. "Approach cautious, full sensor sweep, weapons." She paused, catching herself out of habit, then continued. "Defensive systems on standby." Copy that, Aegis, Okafor's voice replied. Approaching now. As the two ships closed on the outpost's location, the strange energy signature grew stronger, and slowly, a shape began to resolve on the sensors, then on the view screens themselves. It was unlike anything the crew had ever encountered, a vast, sprawling mass of dark, organic-looking material, threaded through with pulsing veins of pale light, covering what had once been the research outpost entirely, consuming its structure, and slowly spreading outward into the surrounding asteroid field. My God, Priya whispered, staring at the image. It's alive. The whole thing is alive. Watchman, analysis, Elena said, her voice steady, despite the unsettling sight before them. Preliminary analysis suggests a biomechanical composite structure, capable of self-replication, using available raw materials. It appears to be consuming the outpost's hull, equipment, and surrounding asteroid matter to fuel its own growth. Captain, I am detecting movement within the mass, possibly indicating some form of distributed intelligence. Any survivors? Elena asked, though she already feared the answer. Scanning. I am detecting faint biological signatures beneath the mass, but they are fading rapidly. I do not believe rescue is possible at this time. Elena's jaw tightened. Then our priority shifts. We are not here to save anyone anymore. We're here to understand what this is, and to make sure it doesn't spread any further. As if responding to the ship's presence, the massive organic structure began to shift, tendrils of the dark material peeling away from the ruined outpost and drifting through open space toward the two human vessels, moving with an unnerving, deliberate purpose. Captain, multiple contacts detaching from the main mass, Aiko reported, alarm creeping into her voice. They're moving toward us. Fast. Bastion, do you see this? Elena called. We see it, Aegis, Okafor replied. Elena studied the approaching tendrils, dozens of them now, each one roughly the size of a small fighter craft, closing the distance with unsettling speed. Evasive maneuvers, both ships. Do not let them make contact with the hull. Watchman, can the loom affect these things? Unknown, Captain. Their composition does not match anything the loom has been tested against. However, given they appear to be physical objects moving through normal space, I estimate the gravity field should still have some effect on their trajectory. Then let's find out, Elena said. Marcus, stand by on the loom. Small-scale deflection, minimum power. Let's see how they react, before we commit to anything larger. The Aegis banked hard, engines flaring as it pulled away from the incoming swarm of tendrils, the gravity loom activating with a soft hum. The nearest tendrils, caught in the deflection field, curved sharply off course, missing the ship by wide margins, exactly as designed. It's working, Priya said, relief evident in her voice. They're being deflected just like normal debris or weapons fire. But the relief was short-lived. Within moments, the remaining tendrils adjusted their approach, curving around the deflection field entirely, adapting to the sudden change in trajectory, with a speed that should not have been possible for anything, without genuine intelligence directing it. Captain, they're compensating, Aiko said, tension returning to her voice. They're learning. Bastion is taking contact, Okafor's voice came through, strained. Two tendrils have latched onto our outer hull, port side. Captain, they're burning through the armor. Not physically, chemically. Some kind of corrosive compound. Elena's eyes widened slightly. This was new. This was a threat unlike the pirates, unlike the ancient gravity trap. A threat that could adapt, that could find weaknesses in defenses designed to stop conventional weapons. Marcus, options, she said urgently. The armor can handle physical impact and energy dispersal, but it wasn't designed to resist chemical corrosion at a sustained contact point, Marcus said, already working through possibilities on his console. If they get a solid grip and start eating through, standard defenses won't stop it. Then we don't let them get a grip, Elena said. Watchman, full power to the loom, widen the deflection field, cover as much of both ships as possible. Marcus, work with Watchman, see if we can generate a stronger repulsion effect, specifically tuned to their mass and speed. Captain, that will draw significant power away from other systems, Watchman warned. Do it anyway. Bastion, hard burn. Get clear of that mass, we'll cover you. The Aegis surged forward, positioning itself between the Bastion and the bulk of the approaching swarm. the gravity loom straining under the increased power draw as it expanded its field to cover both vessels. The tendrils attached to the bastion's hull, still slowly eating through the armor, found themselves suddenly caught in the intensified gravity distortion, their grip weakening as the field pulled and twisted the space around them. "It's working," Okafor reported, relief clear in his voice. "The tendrils are losing their hold. They're being pulled off the hull." "Keep pulling away," Elena ordered. "Full retreat. Both ships. Get clear of the swarm's effective range." As the two ships pulled back, the swarm of tendrils, deprived of their targets, began retreating as well, flowing back toward the massive organic structure consuming the ruined outpost, as if some larger intelligence had decided the engagement was not worth continuing, at least for now. Once both ships had reached a safe distance, Elena allowed herself a long, tense breath. "Status report, all stations. Bastion reports minor hull damage, no casualties," Okafor said. "That was too close, Aegis. If those things had gotten a solid hold on us before we adjusted the field, I don't like to think about what would have happened." "Agreed," Elena said grimly. "Watchman, send everything we just recorded back to Earth Command, and to Ambassador Solon on Velar Prime. The Council needs to see this. Whatever that thing is, it's not a rumor anymore, and it's not something a handful of ships can handle alone." "Transmitting now, Captain," Watchman confirmed. As the two human ships withdrew from the ruined outpost, the massive organic structure behind them continued its slow, silent work, consuming metal and stone alike, growing larger with each passing hour, patient and inexorable, giving no sign of the intelligence that surely lurked within its pulsing, veined mass. Back on Velar Prime, the sensor recordings from the encounter reached the Concord Council within hours, sparking an emergency session unlike anything seen in decades. Delegates who had once dismissed the Ashen Swarm as exaggerated rumor now stared in stunned silence at footage of tendrils adapting in real time to counter human defensive technology, chemically burning through armor that had withstood direct weapons fire from pirate raiders without issue. "This is no longer a border problem," Thasor, the Grand Speaker, said grimly, addressing the assembled council. "If this threat can adapt to counter Terran defensive technology none of our own species have ever faced before, then it represents a danger to every world in Concord space, regardless of species or military strength." Rhea Solon stood before the council once more, this time not to accept a ruling, but to make a request. "Humanity has already engaged this threat twice," she said. "We have lost lives to it. We understand, better than anyone in this chamber right now, that this is not a fight any single fleet can win alone, no matter how clever our engineering. We are asking for cooperation, shared intelligence, shared resources, a unified response before this swarm grows any larger." The chamber fell silent, delegates exchanging uneasy glances. It was Kessa Doln who finally spoke, rising from her seat among the Velari delegation. "The humans banned their own weapons at our demand and built something better instead of retreating. I move that this council formally request Terran assistance in designing a coordinated defense, drawing on the very technology and philosophy that has kept their ships intact against threats none of us have successfully countered." A long, tense debate followed, but in the end, faced with mounting evidence and the very real fear of an unstoppable, growing threat, the council voted, this time not to restrict humanity, but to formally request its help. Aboard the Aegis, still cruising slowly back toward Prometheus Station for repairs and to regroup, Elena Voss received the council's decision with a mixture of relief and grim determination. She gathered her senior officers in the ship's briefing room, the weight of what lay ahead evident on every face. "The council wants our help," she said. "They're asking humanity to lead the design of a unified defense against the Ashen Swarm. That's a big ask, and an even bigger responsibility." "Can we do it?" Priya asked. "That thing adapted to the loom in minutes, Captain. If it keeps learning that fast, we might not be able to stay ahead of it forever." Elena looked around the room at her crew, the people who had spent the last year proving, again and again, that ingenuity could outmatch raw firepower, that survival did not require destruction, that a ship built on cleverness rather than weapons could still hold its own against anything the galaxy threw at it. "We built a ship that needed no weapons to survive pirates," she said quietly. "We built a ship clever enough to shut down a trap older than any species in this galaxy. Now we need to build something clever enough to survive an enemy that learns as fast as we do. She paused, then added, I don't know if we can do it, but I know we're going to try, because that's what we've always done. Marcus nodded slowly. Then let's get to work. The following weeks were the busiest of Marcus Webb's entire career. Working from a shared research station near the border of Concord space, human engineers and Valari scientists, along with representatives from a dozen other species, pooled their knowledge to study the Ashen Swarm and design a response. It was, in many ways, the first true moment of cooperation between humanity and the wider galaxy since the weapons ban had been enacted, and despite the grim circumstances, Elena Voss found a strange kind of hope in watching old rivals and skeptics work side by side toward a common goal. The swarm, meanwhile, did not wait patiently. Reports came in weekly of its slow, steady expansion, consuming asteroid fields, abandoned stations, and unlucky ships that strayed too close. Its growth was not fast, not compared to a traditional invasion fleet, but it was relentless. And worse, it seemed to be growing more coordinated over time, its scattered tendrils beginning to move with increasing precision, as if some central intelligence within the mass was slowly learning, adapting, and refining its strategy. It's not just growing, Watchman explained during one strategy session aboard the Aegis, now docked at the Joint Research Station. Based on patterns observed since our first encounter, I believe the swarm possesses a distributed intelligence, capable of learning from every interaction it survives. Our encounter taught it how to counter gravity-based deflection. Future encounters will teach it more, unless we can find a way to counter it decisively, before it adapts further. So we need something it hasn't seen before, Elena said. Something it can't learn to counter in a single encounter. That is the challenge, yes, Watchman confirmed. Priya Anand, who had spent the past weeks studying samples recovered from the swarm's outer tendrils, brought forward an idea during one particularly long session. I've been looking at the corrosive compound they use to eat through armor, she said, pulling up detailed molecular scans on the briefing room's main display. It's incredibly effective against solid matter, metal, stone, organic material, but it needs contact to work. It has to physically touch a surface to begin breaking it down. So if it can't get close enough to touch us, Marcus said slowly, following her train of thought, the corrosion doesn't matter. Exactly, Priya said. The problem isn't defending against the corrosion itself. It's making sure nothing from the swarm ever gets close enough to apply it in the first place, and we already know the loom can redirect debris and projectiles. The swarm's tendrils just adapted fast enough to compensate. Then we need the loom to do something it can't predict, Elena said, thinking aloud. Not just push it away in one direction. Something unpredictable. Something that changes every time. Watchman considered this for a long moment. Captain, I believe I understand your meaning. A static deflection pattern, no matter how strong, can eventually be learned and countered by a sufficiently adaptive intelligence. But a randomized, constantly shifting gravity field, one with no fixed pattern for the swarm to study and predict, would be far more difficult to overcome, because there would be nothing consistent to learn from. Can we build that? Elena asked, looking to Marcus. Marcus rubbed his chin, already running calculations in his head. It would take serious power, more than the current loom design can handle continuously. But if we could pull additional power from the ship's main reactor, temporarily reducing life support and non-essential systems, I think we could manage short bursts of a truly randomized field. Long enough to disrupt an attack at least. Then that's our starting point, Elena said. Watchman, work with Marcus and the joint research team. I want a working prototype within the week. The swarm isn't waiting for us to take our time. Over the following days, the joint team worked tirelessly, refining the concept into something workable. The Valari scientists contributed their own advanced understanding of energy distribution systems, allowing the design to draw power more efficiently than the original human-only version could have managed alone. Engineers from a small insectoid species called the Chitra, known throughout the galaxy for their skill with adaptive algorithms, helped design a control system capable of generating truly unpredictable gravitational patterns that would shift and change even as they were being generated, leaving nothing consistent for the swarm's learning intelligence to study. By the end of the week, the modified gravity loom, now nicknamed the Chaos Field by the engineering team, was ready for testing. Elena gathered her senior staff, along with Captain Okafor of the Bastion and representatives from the Joint Research Team, for a final briefing, before what everyone understood would be the decisive engagement with the Ashen Swarm. Scouts report the swarm has grown considerably since our last encounter, Aiko said, presenting updated sensor data. It's consumed 2 more asteroid fields, and what remains of an abandoned mining station. Current estimates put its mass at nearly triple what we observed during the first engagement. And its intelligence? Elena asked. Growing along with it, as far as we can tell, Watchman said. I strongly recommend against direct prolonged engagement. The chaos field should prevent it from successfully attacking our hulls, but I cannot guarantee how it will react to a threat it has never encountered before. There is a real possibility it may retreat, rather than continue attacking once its usual methods fail. That would be the best outcome, Elena said, but we should prepare for the possibility that it doesn't retreat. Options, if the chaos field alone isn't enough to drive it off. A Valari scientist named Doran Vex, who had been assigned to the Joint Research Team, spoke up from the back of the room. If I may, Captain, my people have studied the swarm's composition closely over the past weeks. It requires vast amounts of raw material to sustain its growth and its distributed intelligence. If we could somehow separate its core intelligence from the bulk of its mass, isolate it, even temporarily, it may be possible to disable its ability to coordinate entirely, leaving it a mindless, scattered collection of matter, rather than a genuine threat. How would we do that? Elena asked. The chaos field, if focused rather than spread across a wide area, could theoretically create a highly localized gravity well, strong enough to physically separate a portion of the swarm's mass from the rest, Doran explained. If we can identify and target the densest concentration of its neural-like tissue, the section most likely to house its core intelligence, we might be able to isolate it entirely. That's a huge risk. We'd need to get close enough to accurately target the right section, and we still don't know for certain where its brain, so to speak, actually is. I have been working on exactly that question, Watchman said. Based on the movement patterns of the tendrils during our first encounter, I have identified a section near the original outpost's remains that shows unusually high activity and coordination, consistent with what one might expect from a central processing structure. I estimate a 62% confidence level that this is the swarm's primary core. 62%, Elena repeated. Not exactly a sure thing. No, Captain, it is not. Elena was quiet for a long moment, weighing the risks. Finally she nodded. We'll go with it. Even a chance at ending this properly is better than an endless retreat and regroup cycle while it keeps growing. Prepare both ships for departure within the hour. Full crew briefing on the chaos field protocols before we engage. 3 hours later, the Aegis and the Bastion, along with 2 smaller Valari support vessels that had volunteered to assist with the mission, approached the region once more, now home to a massive, sprawling structure of dark organic matter that had grown far beyond the original outpost, spreading across a significant portion of the asteroid field, like some vast, alien coral reef. Contact, Aiko reported as the ships drew close. The swarm is already reacting to our presence, multiple tendrils detaching, moving to intercept. Steady, Elena said. Marcus, stand by on the chaos field. Wait for my mark. The tendrils approached rapidly, dozens of them, larger and more numerous than the first encounter, clearly having grown significantly stronger since then. As they closed to within striking range, Elena gave the order. Activate the chaos field. All ships, hold position. The gravity loom hummed to life, its output now radically different from before, generating a constantly shifting, unpredictable pattern of gravitational distortion around both human ships and their Valari allies. The approaching tendrils, which had adapted so quickly to the previous static deflection pattern, suddenly found themselves flying through space that seemed to twist and pull in directions that made no consistent sense, their trajectories thrown wildly off course again and again, with no pattern for their distributed intelligence to learn or predict. It's working, Priya said, watching the sensor readouts with growing excitement. They can't get a fix on us. Every time they adjust, the field changes before they can complete the adjustment. On the swarm's side, whatever passed for its collective intelligence seemed to register the failure of its usual tactics, and the pattern of the attack began to shift, growing more erratic, almost frantic, as tendril after tendril failed to make contact with either ship. "Captain, this is our window," Watchman said. "The swarm's coordination appears to be breaking down under the strain of the unpredictable field. If we are going to attempt to isolate the core, now is the time." "Do it," Elena said. "Focus the field. Target Watchman's identified core location." Marcus worked quickly, redirecting the chaos field's chaotic energy into a single, powerful, focused burst, aimed directly at the section of the swarm Watchman had identified as its likely central intelligence. The gravitational distortion intensified dramatically at that single point, tearing at the dense organic matter, with a force far beyond anything the swarm's structure had been designed to withstand. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The targeted section of the swarm, easily the size of a small starship, began to physically separate from the rest of the mass, torn away by the concentrated gravity well, drifting slowly into open space, isolated from the vast network it had once been part of. Across the rest of the swarm, the remaining tendrils, no longer receiving coordinated direction from what had apparently been their central intelligence, faltered, their movements becoming sluggish, disorganized, purposeless. Within minutes, the once coordinated attack dissolved entirely into scattered, mindless matter, drifting listlessly through the asteroid field, no longer a threat to anyone. "Captain," Aiko said, her voice filled with disbelief and relief, "the swarm's activity has dropped to almost nothing. Whatever coordination it had, it's gone." Elena allowed herself a long, deep breath, watching the sensor readouts confirm what her crew was reporting. Confirmed status on the isolated core. "Still contained within the focused gravity field," Watchman reported. "Its activity levels remain elevated, but it no longer appears connected to the rest of the mass." "Then let's make sure it stays that way," Elena said. "Marcus, can we maintain containment long enough for the joint research team to study it safely, from a secure distance?" "I think so, Captain. It'll take everything the loom's got, but yes." Over the following days, with the isolated core safely contained, and the remaining scattered mass of the swarm rendered harmless without its central coordination, teams of scientists from across the Concord, humans and Valari and Chitra and many others working side by side, began the careful, painstaking work of studying what they had found, determined to understand this ancient threat well enough to ensure it, or anything like it, could never again grow unchecked in the dark corners of the galaxy. 6 months later, Elena Voss stood once more in the Great Council chamber on Velar Prime, this time not as a quiet observer, but as an honored guest, invited by the very council that had once banned humanity's weapons. Ambassador Rhea Solon stood beside her, and around them, delegates from dozens of species watched with expressions far different from the cold suspicion of years before. Grand Speaker Thasser rose to address the chamber. 1 year ago, this council made a ruling that many believed would weaken the Terran species, stripping away the tools that made them feared throughout known space. Instead, that ruling revealed something far more valuable than any weapon, a species capable of turning restriction into innovation, and innovation into salvation, for worlds far beyond their own. He turned to Elena directly. "Captain Voss, on behalf of the Valari Concord, I extend our deepest gratitude, and our formal recognition that the UES Aegis and her crew, alongside the joint research effort that followed, have done more to protect this galaxy than any weapon ever could." Elena stepped forward, her voice steady and clear as it carried across the vast chamber. "A year ago, you told humanity we could not have our weapons. You were right to be cautious. Power without wisdom is dangerous, no matter which species wields it. But you also taught us something valuable that day, something we had perhaps forgotten in all our years of building better and better ways to fight." She paused, looking around at the assembled delegates. "You taught us that surviving doesn't require destroying. It requires understanding, patience, and the willingness to find another way when the first way is closed to you. That is what we built when you took away our weapons. Not a weaker ship, a smarter one." The chamber erupted into applause, an unusual sight in a place normally defined by cold formality and careful diplomacy. As the sound washed over her, Elena thought of Marcus in engineering, of Priya studying every strange new problem with tireless curiosity, of Aiko watching the stars for the next challenge, of Watchmen quietly calculating solutions no one else had considered, and of the crew of the UES Aegis, who had proven, again and again, that humanity's greatest strength had never truly been its weapons at all. It had always been its refusal to stop looking for another way.